Hey YouTube, not a keto video, not a garden video, not a typical Jack video, just fish tank video. See, we're hanging out in my office with all my fish tanks. So this is a new tank I just set up and planted, and I thought maybe you'd all like to see it. And I like to get videos of these and get them on my YouTube channel when I first do them, so that I can really appreciate how they grow in over time. So again, this is just a fun video, not any of my typical content. This is more of a Jack personal video, Fish Geek video. So here's what we got going on. I got a 40-gallon breeder up on top of this rack, a couple of shrimp breeding tanks below it. Those are some white cloud minnows. They're just a really hardy fish I'm using to help kind of cycle the tank in. They won't be in there for the long term. This is going to probably be a tank featuring tiger barbs. Tiger barbs are cheap and abundant and really hardy. They're kind of dicks to fish with long fins. Like my beautiful angel there, I'd never put tiger barbs in with him or his mate over there because they'll peck at their fins. But with the right fish, they're a great looking little fish, and actually they get pretty big. They get about like that. But I thought maybe you'd like to see what I've done with this tank and a little bit different approach I've taken. Number one, if you look right there, it looks like there's an awful lot of gravel in that tank. This is actually a dirt bottom tank. While it's not running as a completely natural tank, as there is aeration and filtering in it, we're running it on that type of philosophy. And if you look over here, you can see there is an awful lot of dirt. There's actually dirt and then a basalt layer between the dirt and the gravel. From some Eco Complete, which is a substrate that I use a lot. So there's a lot of fertility built into this. There's root tabs from Coriat Aquarium Co-op as a fertilizer level, 1 packet of root tabs between the gravel and that layer I just showed you. And at the bottom, I actually went ahead and used this stuff right here. Osmocote. This is very well thought of in the aquarium industry. I don't ever use conventional fertilizers in the food that I eat, but in a fish tank, this stuff works fine. It's just a little scattering of it on the bottom. And you can make your own root tabs with this. You just buy the empty caps, gel caps, like for making capsules you would eat. Fill them with these and shove them down into your gravel. About 1 every 4 inches in a grid pattern in your gravel. Even if you're not running a dirt tank, will do amazing things for your plants. We'll talk about the lighting and the filtration in a minute. Let's talk about some of the plants that are in here. Number one, you see a bunch of little bitty grass looking things sticking up. That's all called dwarf Sagittaria. I got that from a seller on eBay. We'll see how it does, but it was a hell of a deal of these plants. They made, Sagittaria, cryptocorns, a lot of things like that will melt back a lot and usually grow pretty strong. If these don't melt back hard and they grow pretty good, I'm going to definitely let you guys know who the seller is, because the deal I got on this is better than anything else I've ever found. There's like 25 individual little plants that I popped in there yesterday. Right there, that is known as Anubias nana petite, which is basically little baby Anubias. They don't get very big. They grow kind of slow, and I've got a bunch of those in there. I actually have, right here, I have one I grew on driftwood. And you see it doesn't get as much nutrient in this tank as some of my other tanks, because there's no dirt in this tank. And Anubias will do fine just growing on driftwood, but there's not a lot of water column nutrient in here. It's a pretty balanced tank. So, and then it doesn't get quite enough light. Some of those leaves are underneath the shade of that driftwood there, that Manzanito driftwood. But I pull little pieces. Pretty much I keep that in there just to plant other tanks. And I'll just pull them off by the rhizome. And I'll give you a little trick here for planting all types of Anubias. Anubias, most people try to grow it on rocks or wood or what have you, and they think that it's not much of a root feeder. That is bull crap. Any plant that makes roots will use those roots and take all the nutrient it can get through those roots if the nutrient's there. Just because it doesn't need to be a heavy root feeder doesn't mean it won't do it. But it grows in a rhizome, and you can see right there's a little rhizome, and that rhizome needs to not be in the gravel. Eventually you can kill the plant if you bury the rhizome. But you can bury the rhizome for a while and it won't kill it. It won't hurt it at all. It takes a while for that to happen. So when you first plant them, what you can do is you put them down into your substrate and you leave them there for a couple weeks. And that way the roots will start spreading, and the roots will start going down into your substrate and spread out. Then go in and use either your tongs, I use planting tongs, or use your fingers if you plant with your hands, and just barely pull it up really, really slow until the rhizome comes up just to the surface level. You'll have a perfectly planted Anubias, and you'll get plenty of root action And you can see these plants came off of that one I cut. You can see how it's already greening up in just a couple weeks. And that's from that. There's an old, I don't even remember what this is. I think it's an old, it's adaptogen, might be the species of plant. It's not really a sword plant. I always call them swords, but they're not, you know, swords are more like that right there. But that's been around forever. I had it in this tank over here, and it threw some pups, and that's a pup off of it. And it looks pretty sad. It was in another tank where it just wasn't getting enough light and didn't have enough substrate. But you see all the new leaves starting to come off it already. That's wisteria. That gets huge. I don't know if this tank is going to long-term have wisteria in it. It can take over a tank. But for getting it off the ground, I figured go ahead and pop in one piece. And that's really starting to come along already just as a cutting. That's one of the easiest aquarium plants you can grow with or without CO2. I do everything right now without CO2. But that's a great plant. These two plants you got right here and right there, those are red flame swords. And I've got enough supplemental iron in here. I should get quite a good amount of red in those. If you want red in your plants like that, we'll talk about that in a second. You want enough iron. That's where that red will come from in the plant. So these get really big. These are also another incredibly easy plant. Even when you don't have really badass lighting and you don't have CO2, it doesn't matter. You give these guys some good root tabs and give them some good dirt to work with, and they will make you look like a pro. Then over here you have a couple of little ones, and they're not doing so well. They don't. This is Cryptocorn Wendy or Wendity or however the hell you say it. This is a beautiful plant, easy plant, honey badger of a plant, but doesn't like water changes, has a lot of melting back and unhappiness. But once it settles in, this is just an amazing plant. This is another crypt over here. I think this is, if I remember right, this is Cryptocorn Lucernes, Cryptolucernes, and same type of thing. You can see a lot of the leaves have melted back. That one's doing pretty good. They'll get about maybe a third taller than they are and pretty well spread, and it should be really nice. Back there, that is called Rotala indica. And that plant, this is why I love having multiple tanks. Once you get multiple tanks, you don't have to spend all this money on plants. The only plants I bought in here are those red swords and the dwarf sage. All the rest of this has come from other tanks. But you can see this guy here, just looking great. And it's just a little bit of that supplemental fertilizer tabs I was talking about making with some good iron supplementation in them. And you get that beautiful orangey red. You can see in here, it's actually much happier in here. Those are all cuttings off that same plant I just showed you, and it's already starting to redden up. It's going to do even better in here than it is in that other tank. You see some leaves right there that looks like this guy, only they're bigger. This is Anubias nana petite, so that is, you guessed it, Anubias nana. So it's just a larger leafed species of the same family of plants. And then this guy here, actually I did buy this plant. I bought this plant at Petco. If you buy plants at Petco, they come in those little tubes that are, you know, on the shelf, and they sit there for days and days and hours and months and years with no care whatsoever. You're probably going to have, see how that one's starting to kind of lose its color? We'll see how it does. It may even die back, but that's another Anubias species, Anubias coffeefolia, and that's a great plant. And you can see I just got that in there. So it's actually got the rhizome buried right now, so I'm not real happy about that. I'm hoping to get a little bit of rooting action. And what we'll do, we'll pull it up each week, about 1 millimeter each week, as it puts those roots down until we get it where we want it. And it'll do fine. All these Anubias species, one of the best species of plants for beginners. They're really hardy. Takes about 6 months of abuse before they'll die if you do kill them. So you get plenty of time to correct it. They grow slowly, so they do not require a lot of maintenance. People say they always want plants to grow fast. Well, you know, when like that wisteria starts taking off and all, I'm going to have to be in there pruning it and controlling it weekly, or it'll get out of hand. And then it'll shade everything out, and everything else will die from shade. So slow-growing, low plants are the easy ones to maintain. Sagittaria, these little grass ones I started out with, they're low. They don't really get real tall. They spread like crazy and will carpet. But they're still a good plant, and they're easy to control because you just pull out the ones you don't want. All right. Is there anybody we missed? Oh, see the little foxtail looking thing there, and there's another one right there, a little poofy one. That is Ambula. And Ambula is another one of those plants that a lot of people will tell you, including people I really respect, that they're a water column feeder, so they will not get much nutrient from the substrate. And I will tell you, bullshit. That is not the case. They can feed like crazy from the water column. If you make sure you have good nutrient in your water column, they will grow really, really fast. But if you don't have a lot of nutrient in your water column, and you do have a lot of nutrient in your substrate, which is right where I'm at right now. I have a few fish. I haven't done any supplemental fertilization, but all that fertility's in there. You see what that looks like? See how beautiful that is? See that beautiful green? See all that new growth? You see where it went from about, let me see if I can get my finger in there, about right there to right there, where the green is a different color. That's because it's brand new growth. I put this plant in there 3 days ago. It did that, okay? Which is really more like that big because it's way there in the back for scale. It did that since, what, 3 or 4 days. So if you look in here, this is where I got that plant. I took it from a cutting from some of these in here. That plant has been about as tall as it is for about, 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, I have to prune these back in this tank very, very seldom because there's not a lot of nutrient in the water column, but there's not also not a lot of nutrient down there in the substrate. This is a straight gravel tank. So as soon as that got in there, I mean, this stuff roots fast. So it's just now putting on its roots, and it's already starting to explode. This thing within a week or two will be to the top of the tank, and I will have to make a decision as another plant, do I want it in there long term? Because it can take over aquariums. So just because something is a water column feeder and what's called a stem plant basically means you can cut any piece of it anywhere, stick it in, it'll root and grow. Just because it's a stem plant doesn't mean it will not benefit from a good nutrient-dense subsoil. And then in the back you see the really tall grass. Let me tell you something. If you want to run a low-tech tank, which means no CO2, and you don't have the greatest lights, but you got any decent light, and you could only have one plant, and you want your tank to look awesome, that's what you want. That's called jungle Vallisneria. And that stuff will happen. It'll take a couple weeks to settle in there, and once it does and the roots go down, every single one of those will send out a little runner that'll go a couple inches over, and go poof, and make a new one. And after about a week, that new one will be an inch and a half tall. And before it's even 2 or 3 inches tall, it'll go bloop, it'll put out another one. And then you'll have one that's 3 or 4 inches tall, one that's about 2 inches tall, and bloop, another one. And it'll just keep going. And the only thing with that is you'll have to decide when you want to stop it, when you want to start trimming off those side shoots. But if you take a tank and you don't do anything to it, but put a few pieces of Vallisneria in it, give it a good subsoil and a decent light, that Vallisneria will fill the whole tank. And a tank full of Val looks good. And I ain't saying that just because my mascot for my podcast is called Val. I'm doing it for a totally different reason. Let's talk a little bit about the hardware that's going on here. I'm running 2 Finex Stingrays. This is kind of my favorite lower end light. Finex makes good stuff. And you look at these as like a T5 replacement with new LED technology, each one kind of standing in for a T5. This tank may benefit from 3 of these, but I probably won't ever need to do that. I'll watch the plants. I can always turn on this big Goonie here if I want to. This is a 300 watt daylight spectrum bulb. This is really for shooting video though, and if I run this all the time, I'm going to have algae problems. I'm running a 3060 Aquafina, I guess is the brand. Doesn't really matter. Over the back or OTB filter, and I am not running those stupid little inserts that they tell you to run. I am running aquarium filter sponge. This comes from a company called Fluval, and it's for their 70-gallon filters. And if you get the 3060 Aquatech, that's what it is, Aquatech, and you take the 70-gallon sponges from Fluval, and you cut them in half long ways, they fit perfectly in here like they were made to go in this filter. Underneath each of these is a bag full of something called BioRings, which I won't get into today. But this is a hot rodded filter. If you think about the inserts that go in there, you got a little bitty thin surface area, not much bigger than this red thing right here. With this, you've got all the surface area of the rings and all the surface area of the sponge. You've got about 10 times more surface area on one side than the whole damn thing had before. So you've got about 20 times the surface area, and that's where all your bacteria that do all the work in keeping your tanks balanced exist on that surface area. So that's how that's run. Additionally, as you can see, I'm well overbuilding the biology of this tank. That's an intake sponge. So normally they give you a stupid little screened thing that all kinds of crap can go up into for your intake on these. These are coarse grade intake sponges. I get them from Aquarium Co-op, which is where I get a lot of stuff. And you see how it kind of looks twisted up there? That's a piece of aluminum baling wire that's wrapped around there to hold that on, because it's really for a bigger intake. But the bigger the sponge, the longer between cleanings. And you see it's a very coarse grade sponge. So now I've got all that surface area that water's being pulled through. plus all the surface area up in there. That's enough surface area to run a 120-gallon tank, and this is a 40-gallon tank. But I'm not done. On each side, these are new, and I'm trialing these. These are from Corey at Aquarium Co-op as well, and this is a product he designed and brought out himself because he saw a need for it, and I agree, and I think you can see it better from the side over here. This is called the sponge filter, and it works with an air pump, and basically there's see that air line coming in? It pumps air down inside there. Once the air's in there, it comes flying up out of there. Well, if you got air going in and air coming out, it has to take water with it. So that draws water through those two sponges. So honestly, this tank, set up and well balanced, could run on one of these by itself. But we've got the 3060 Aquatech hot rodded, and we got two of these. That means I can probably overstock a little bit, which is the plan, because overstocking tiger barbs is how you turn off the asshole attitude that they have. They're a schooling fish, and when there's enough of them together, they feel safe. When you put too few of them in a tank, then they feel paranoid, because it's like having your boys rolling with you when you're going down the streets. You got enough friends with you, you're not worried, you're not jumpy, you're not anxious. You're by yourself in a strange area, you're like, wait a minute, I'm exposed. That's how tiger barbs are. So that's where we're at with the tank. I still got the blacked out back as the plants come in. That'll just create a sense of depth. I really like black gravel like this tank down here. I've done tours of that tank before. That's a all nano fish tank. But when you're doing a real high featured tank like this, the black back is great, but having a light gravel, more natural tone gravel, really reflects more light and you get more out of it. So you guys got any questions about this? Like I said, I know this really doesn't have nothing to do with my podcast, nothing to do with preparedness or homesteading or nutrition or health or anything like that I usually talk about, but I figure some of y'all anyway would like to see the stuff that I do just for fun, that I am a normal person with some normal hobbies, and we'll catch up with you later. I was looking, I got a dwarf gourami in here, but he's hiding somewhere. I thought you'd like to see him. They're called a sparkling gourami. They're a really cool little fish, but he doesn't want to come out and play right now. But Mr. White Clouds, you guys are going to get 86 to a different tank soon. The tiger barbs are coming.